Hello, everyone. Um, I want to start something new. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and so we're going to do it. I want to discuss tarot, oracle, Lenormand cards. There's lots of things that can be used for divination purposes. There's charms, bones, runes, tea leaves, palmistry, reading your palm, phrenology, reading your brain or your head, your scalp. Lots and lots of ways. Right now, cards are very, very popular in the United States, at least definitely in my area. Um, so I really want to focus just on cards. Cards have been used, I have notes. Cards have been used for about 500 or 600 years. The first, the first, the first presence that I could find of cards was actually the Islamic soldiers invading northern Italy brought a game called Mamluk, 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 with them. So the Islam nations at that time, this was 1400s, 15th century, sometime around there. They already had these playing cards they had four suits, the four suits that we're all kind of familiar with in just regular playing cards. They weren't the four suits of today, but they had the four suits. And then they brought them to northern Italy when they did some invading. The soldiers did, and the Italians would make stories and poems with these cards. Now, every deck of cards was not mass produced, they were hand painted cards. So imagine you would have to be somewhat wealthy. Soldiers got pretty good pay, at least if they were on a winning side. If they're doing invading, they probably are getting pretty good pay. My animals are going to come along and mess up the table here. Just sit down and relax. But even so, these were hand painted. They aren't mass produced. I walked into a shop today and there was probably a good 24 different decks of cards available just in this little metaphysical shop. Just boom, and if I wanted to, I could order some on Amazon, or I could have ordered, a deck there at the shop that she would have gone in for me, readily available. And no matter what you like nowadays, readily available. But these are hand painted cards in the 1400s and the 1500s, individual decks. Everyone is going to be a little bit different. I actually one of the series of books that I read, they talk about the cards, the hand-painted cards that the soldiers play with in this series of books. And they talk about the rulers, which would be our court cards, our kings and queens and pages and knights. The rulers were painted according to who was the ruler of that nation. So if the ruler changed, then they had to paint new cards because there's a new, there's a new king or queen or whatever, So a lot of that going on in the 1500s. The Italians were with the Italians making stories and poems with these cards from the imagery and the symbols. The French occultists came along and they would give divination meanings to these symbols on these cards. And that was 1500s, again 1600s. In 1875, Aleister Crowley came along. Well, he was born. He was English. He is very famous in witchcraft circles. He did a lot of witchcraft stuff that was very popular and is still popular today, Aleister Crowley. But he reinvented and created the kind of what we call the tarot deck, the Thoth tarot, took some imagery out, added some in, added some of the Jewish Kabbalah imagery, some more Christianity imagery, took some out, like I said. Then we had the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and that was first published in 1909. It's been called the Rider-Waite deck almost exclusively since it was published until just the last few years, where we've added the Smith because these cards were illustrated by a woman named Pamela Coleman Smith, and we want to make sure we're giving her her due. The mystic who wrote the words and the meanings for all the cards was A.E. Waite. And the writer, where we got Rider, was actually just the publishing company. Yeah, we've got Hay House and Blue Angel and Los Rambo and all of those going on nowadays. But that's how it got its name. And that is still probably the most popular basic tarot deck out there today. Millions of decks of those sold. Mr. Waite gave some new symbols, did some removing, changing some of the major arcana cards, pretty much did an overhaul. And like I said, is what most decks are based on today. The tarot deck is a 78 card deck. That is a tarot deck. And we're going to talk about oracle cards now. Oracle cards they're not tarot cards, for sure. They don't always have the suits. Sometimes they might have some organization, different. I've had oracle decks that have different categories of organization, but there's no definite number of cards. There's no definite system of the cards. When I talk about oracle cards from pretty much here on out, I'm going to talk about it's going to be kind of all inclusive. Your daily meditation cards, your inspirational cards, just anything that is not tarot. And the way the oracle came about was a lady named, hold on, we're going to get to her, Marie Lenormand, obviously French. Born 1772, died 1843. So this is the time that she started taking and creating this, using and creating this it's just kind of pronounced all one word now, Lenormand, but it was Lenormand, her name. She was a French fortune teller, very famous, again, in her time, a little bit before Aleister Crowley, obviously. And it wasn't even actually until after her death that this deck of cards took on her name, was named after her. 32 to 36 cards in the deck. And again, we have suits and we have court cards, but we've also got some other cards too that would be, I guess, kind of like the majors. But all of them still have, to this day, have like a little section in the bigger card of like a 7 of hearts or a 10 of clubs. It'll still have that along with the imagery, the anchor or the ring or the scroll. And so that's kind of how the oracles cards kind of came around. The Lenormand is still structured like the tarot and still used today. Where the path of the tarot was kind of Italy, France, in that area, the path of the Lenormand went down to Central Europe, the Balkans, and down to Brazil. And Russia, up to Russia and down to Brazil. So as far as geographically, we've got the Lenormand kind of going over here and the tarot kind of going over here. And then we've got this, what we call this all-encompassing oracle today, which, like I said, can have any number of cards. Usually probably about 36 to maybe 60 in most of the decks that I have that are just oracle cards. Basic imagery. There's no structure. I find them a lot easier to use for day to day. Practical. Remember, this is practical priestessing. Practicality. For my practical, I will pull an oracle card once or twice a week and just focus on that message. It's not unless I'm doing a reading that I will usually get out my tarot cards. And then in my readings, I actually usually use both oracle and tarot. Again, I have never used a Lenormand deck. I do have one that was a friend of mine self-published, and I just wanted to support her, and I got it, and I looked at it, and it confused me. So maybe by the time we're all done with this series, I'll know more about the Lenormand, and maybe I'll start using that. But again, today I just wanted to kind of do a brief history of the tarot, the Lenormand, and the oracle, kind of how they came about, give you a little taste of the difference. Again, tarot, very structured, 78 cards, the major arcanas and the minors, and then you've got the 4 suits and the minors. Oracle cards are a free-for-all, any number of cards. Like I said, usually no structure. Sometimes there might be categories, but so we're gonna dive in a little bit deeper. But I just wanted to do an introduction today and a little bit of history, and I just hope you all have a wonderful day. Mwah.